All right, we're going.
Jake Baird, Buddy Moore. How you guys doing?
Outstanding. How you doing?
Damn good.
Good. Just trying to figure out my fucking webcam and microphone situation.
Yeah, I hate that.
What a week!
What a
Woo!
week. What a
Hey,
year.
good news though. I heard that the Evergreen ship is out of the Suez Canal, so that's the only bright thing that's happened.
Yeah.
What do 8 Egyptians have the ability to do? Move one of the largest ships on the planet.
Are you guys with me that was intentionally done?
No,
You don't think so?
I don't think so. No,
That ship drew a penis and balls before it did that.
I stopped believing coincidences a while ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where it was just bound to happen. One of the things that when I look at that, I'm like, when else has that happened? In the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal? Has that ever happened in 200 years?
I don't know.
Not as far as I know, but it's too much, right? The whole thing is too strange, especially with the penis and balls.
Exactly.
I can't believe that wasn't intentional.
The other thing that I thought was strange, and I don't know if it was just the pictures that we were seeing on the internet, but it's like in the entire country of Egypt and all the bordering countries, they could only get one excavator to start digging it out. It's like here in America, we have lots full of excavators. Like between Tucson and Phoenix, you pass by a cat dealership and there's 50 of those things. It's like, man, let's overnight one of those. You call up Jeff Bezos from Amazon Prime, ship him an excavator, so that way we can get this thing dug out. But apparently they have one in the entire country of Egypt.
Well, I was going to say, I think it was the 60s when the Egyptians went ahead and said, no, the Suez Canal is now ours.
Oh, right.
So, I mean, we were just waiting on the Egyptians at that point. But I don't know. When you say the dick and the balls, Jake, I'm actually kind of confused. I didn't see that anywhere. What are you talking about?
It was out.
So the ship, if you look on the course it took, right, before it got stuck, it went and did a circle and then another circle and then it went a long oval, and if you look at the track of it, it's a dick and balls.
No,
it's definitely
Yeah.
a phallic symbol, majorly. Like I've seen the footage from it, and it's from a reputable website. It's not some fringe thing that tracks the ship.
Really?
It was on the news. Yeah, it's very clearly what it is.
If we were to ask who was behind that, who would it be though? Who would make a phallic symbol and then stick it right in the middle of the Suez Canal?
It was probably 13-year-old Andrew Jones. He took control of the ship, and
I wish.
Were your time traveling self.
I mean, honestly, if myself in the future is Steve Bannon, that's okay with me. just tell him the deckhand to say, "Listen, man, all right, I'll give you $200K if you make a dick and balls." And then you get it stuck.
Well,
that would be so awesome.
Here's the crazy thing, though. I've heard, and I've done a little bit of research into this just because out of curiosity. Apparently, to even go into either the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal, you have to use an in-country pilot. Like a pilot has to come and board your ship, and they're supposed to navigate the waterway. And I hear it's super corrupt, though. Like I've heard that it's almost a known fact among the shipping industry that the pilots will demand payment of goods, like a carton of cigarettes or something, to pilot. I don't know. It just the whole situation sounds really, really, really fishy.
Well,
so look at it. Let me say this real quick. So oil and energy prices were starting to plummet, right? And that's not good for the ruling elite. And what did we see? We saw this happen. The blocking of the Suez Canal, and then also we saw multiple attacks across oil refineries across the world, and then after that, oil started going back up.
Yeah, there was one in Indonesia, right? An attack on a refinery there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did see that one.
Well, you know what's interesting about this is when I go ahead and look at what is it, truck travel, and how trucks will go ahead, like individuals will go ahead and pilot trucks
Hmm.
up until they get to, or even I shouldn't say individuals. Artificial intelligence will pilot trucks, let's say, until the outside of a major metropolitan area like Phoenix or Ohio, Phoenix, Cincinnati, New York, and then there will go ahead. Somebody will go ahead and get into a truck and pilot it into like the CVS or the Walgreens or Walmart or whatever it is. So, do you think if we have the same kind of system in the Suez and the Panama Canal happen in inner cities? I mean, it's an open-ended question, right? I think that's what we'll eventually see in inner cities is AI up to a pilot. Do you think you guys will see the same thing? Cartons of cigarettes and whatever else that they're going to go ahead and bribe with? Or if we'll go ahead and see somebody get stuck in the middle of the fucking I-10 and have that kind of thing happen?
If there's
Probably
a
from
reason to, they
California.
absolutely would.
Yeah.
Whether I don't think AIs are going to make mistakes, right? If AI is actually controlling vehicles autonomously or whatever, uh, I don't think there are going to be any mistakes that will be made. It's going to be anything like that happens would be intentional, I think.
I mean, at the very beginning is like artificial intelligence on the interstate, super easy to program. But once they start getting into like a city, you'll have a pilot like Jake or Buddy get into the truck. Do you think there will be some sort of bribery going on, like the Suez Canal, and somebody go ahead and signal the truck across the I-10?
See, I think it's interesting though, but like, I think that there's probably bribery in place just because of like, I'm a big fan of paying people what they're worth, you know. But if like it's a specialized enough job, I think that it should pay what it what it needs to be paid. I don't know.
Hmm.
I guess then I was listening to your guys' podcast from last week, and you talked a lot about like greed. I mean, that's a big thing wherever there's humans, there's greed, right? So I'm sure in some cases there's corruption in almost every industry, every structure of government. There's a certain amount of corruption, right? So I'm sure you'd see it creep in, even for something like that.
I think no, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think you'll see that across any industry, no matter where you are. But I think at least the last four podcasts that we've done, Jake, is being the pragmatist between us two and us three, I should say, saying that there will be greed no matter what. It's just the varying degree of greed with that individual in that certain position. So, I mean, maybe not in Phoenix that you would see that kind of pilot program with the artificial intelligence up to Phoenix, but you might have somebody that's really, you know, very greedy in, let's say, Salt Lake City on the I-40 or the I-80, I should say. So we saw it in the Suez Canal, but we didn't see it in the Panama Canal.
Well, I don't know. I've been watching a lot. I mean, during this whole like being at home thing, I've watched a ton of movies about or TV shows about like cartels and stuff. And it sounds like Panama's kind of a free for all as well. I think so much attention has been on the Suez Canal that I don't know. Maybe a crisis needs to happen there for us to learn all the dirty secrets of the region.
I
That's
think
true.
a lot of it just has to do with oil and the location of the Suez Canal. Like, I'm sure, like, who knows what kind of shit is being smuggled on the black market through the Panama Canal, the Suez Canal. What's being hidden in those containers and like any number of things and any number of different people running different black markets
There
who
was
are heavily involved in some of these higher elite circles. If they want something, that's what's going to cause things like that to happen. And if they don't, if it's not in their agenda, they're not going to allow it to happen.
well,
I don't think.
wasn't the ship destined for Rotterdam? I think it was.
Was it?
Yeah,
Really?
I had seen that about a couple, maybe it was a year ago exactly. It was like the Dutch police in Rotterdam. They had found shipping containers with like it looked like a dental suite inside of a shipping container, but there was websites out there and news sources that were saying it wasn't a dental, like a little dental suite. It was like a torture chamber in a shipping container. But that's diving into the whole conspiracy theory side of things. But
Hey, man, that's why we do this podcast, is to go ahead and kind of delve in deeper into the meaning of current events. And I mean, towards that actual. I mean, the thing that confuses the hell out of me, right? Again, the pragmatist, is I've never heard of this in either the Panama or the Suez Canal since either one of their inceptions, right? How the hell did this happen? I mean, we've had the 1960 Egyptian war against Israel, where they went ahead and stopped shipping during the 60s. Again, Egypt fighting Israel. And that was like the only time. And then just one random ship gets stuck in a windstorm in
So I'll say this
2021?
again. I'll say this again, right? The elite control this shit to a very insane degree. So if someone gets out of line, they will have them killed. And if something like this happens, it's intentional. It serves the elite's agenda. That's my opinion.
I mean, dude, it's just
yeah.
it's just so wild that in 200 plus years of the existence of the Suez Canal, this has never happened. Maybe I don't know, but I mean, this is billions of dollars in, what was it, 10 days, right? 10 days of this. I mean, I don't understand it. Like, that's the one thing that kind of boggles my mind is how did one ship just clog up all of trade in the world? Well, Mediterranean. I guess I should say the world.
Yeah, it's a global network now. It's all tied together. But I'd heard some interesting theories that I came across on the internet. Like some of the stuff that's happening in the Taiwan Strait, and it would have been even more fishy if not only had something happened in the Suez Canal, but if we saw something crazy happen in also the Panama Canal. Because
when you say
oh, go ahead.
The Taiwan Strait, what do you mean? What happened? I don't know.
With an escalation of things happening between China and Taiwan, and because I think China is trying to say that Taiwan is part of China, but Taiwan has the whole independent. They're a sovereign country.
Yeah.
There's the whole crisis that's happening right now with North Korea shooting ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan. So that whole region's like a tinderbox. And you guys talk a lot about like Hong Kong and Hong Kong before the pandemic hit and stuff. I feel like that's just crazy things waiting to happen. I've also noticed that there's some sovereignty issues in the South China Sea between China and the Philippines. It was the Filipino. I don't remember. It was like their defense ministry had issued a storm warning because there's a fleet of Chinese fishing vessels that are anchoring off a coral reef in South China Sea. And in the past, China has apparently utilized kind of their fishing fleet, and they stock it with this military, this naval militia to impose their reign on and impose on other people's sovereign, their shipping lanes. And I think it was like 1/3 of the world's shipping traffic goes through the Philippines, their exclusive economic zone in the Pacific Ocean. And then you have China anchoring. I mean, it was just, there's so much stuff happening with China right now, whether it be in Taiwan, North Korea, the Philippines, that it's really fishy that the route that our Atlantic fleet could utilize to get to the South China Sea was blocked for a week, for 10 days.
Well, I guess a question to Jake, too, just because you have that kind of idea of the global elite. If we look at the trends of global warming and we see what China will become, you can go ahead and see China as like Beijing, a lot of these large metropolitan areas will be underwater in the next 100 years if global warming continues on, right? Like Florida will be underwater, a large part of that Yellow River region will be underwater.
If the Three Gorges Dam doesn't break,
yeah, the Three Gorges. Well, they'd still be screwed. But do you think that that's intentional? Like to say, let China and Taiwan do whatever they want. Who cares? They're going to be underwater in the next 100 years.
I don't believe that those stats are real. I think global warming, like obviously the climate changes. And
Yeah.
this is kind of like, I hate this debate so much, right? Because it forces me to say stupid things that everyone fucking says. But like, it's true,
Yeah.
right? Like they've been coming up with these, the world's going to be underwater in 100 years predictions since the 1920s, and it's not happening. There's no evidence it's going to happen. We should certainly take steps to take care of the environment, take fucking plastic out of the ocean, stop wasting water and resources, and strive for fuel efficient vehicles and eventually better fuel alternatives. Letting the government tax carbon and mandate things that just make it more expensive for poor people to live is not helping. So the agenda for global warming is, again, just control from the elite.
Wealth redistribution. I mean,
That's true.
you think about like the Paris Climate Agreement and some of these other climate change things. They focus on industrialized nations that are do a far better job of managing pollution, and they refocus not, I don't want to say the blame, because in order to get to this industrialized state that we live in and this privilege that we have, we had to go through an industrial revolution. We had to kind of climb the ladder to where we are. But like, look at carbon emissions in countries like India and China. They're I mean, I've seen pollution maps, and the United States is far cleaner in carbon emissions than any of those countries. But in all of these climate agreements, it's the First Nation countries, these industrialized Western nations, that are kind of bearing the brunt of it. And
Even if we were to take the stats at face value, it would take China and India to change their ways and participate to make any meaningful change. The fact that they aren't involved in any of these accords, it means that they're futile. They're not going to change anything.
I honestly think it's also an outright attack on certain industries as well. Like, there's all of this science, right, that says that cows are the cause of carbon emissions, but like, I don't know. I've spent a lot of my life around cows, and the air is a heck of a lot cleaner around cows than it is in the middle of the city. Like,
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely.
I don't know.
I mean,
Cows are, I mean, I don't know. I'm talking from bias here, but
well, I mean, as a purely human kind of experience, right? You go to a dairy farm versus middle city, let's say Phoenix or Cincinnati or Denver or whatever, and you look up. It's like, well, the air is clean if you go to the dairy farm, right? If you go to the middle of the city somewhere else, it's not going to be so clean.
well,
It,
there's the smell aspect. There's methane, but there's farmers and ranchers are doing so much to try and
Yeah.
reuse. Like, they're the original environmentalists in terms of like any type of waste that leaves the facility is like, that's money out of their pockets. And from thinking from like a purely capitalistic mindset, is they don't there's not a whole lot of margin or room for error in agriculture. Like, they're the only industry. I think it was Ronald Reagan that says that they buy things retail, they sell things wholesale, and they pay shipping both ways. Like, they get
yeah.
the rough end of the deal in terms of it. So they're not gonna. I mean, anything. So like, there's ways that like these cattle producing places like feedlots and dairy places, they're trying to reduce their emissions and their kind of their carbon emissions and things like that, but also they're trying to find ways to reuse some of that. So like, with like some of like their liquid waste and stuff like that, ways where they're trying to harvest the methane gas from it to utilize it in some other way. Like, I don't know. It's just, they do everything they can to try to make an extra dollar because there's no room for error. Most of these
Yeah.
farms are kind of on a shoestring budget trying to, and
Yeah.
there's very successful farmers out there, and ranchers and things like that, but they have to work really hard at trying to even stay in the industry.
No, that's a great question. Well, a great statement, I should say. And a question to follow up with that is, if I were an individual, right, and I want to go ahead and start an enterprise as a farm, right, which country should I be in? And what type of farming or ranching should I be doing in 2021 to be the most lucrative? What would you say? Like, which country and which enterprise should I be in?
That's really tough because I think that people are so freaked out about their food, and there's so much regulation
Yeah.
there's so much regulation on every, and here especially in the United States, like we're way they regulate everything, and some things it makes sense to regulate, right? Like we want to make sure that our food is safe for us to eat and things like that. But I
No,
don't know
fuck
if I
that.
could identify a country that you would start. But as far as like if to be a profitable business, and it's really hard to get into farming, right? And let's say if you didn't
Hmm.
a commercial backing, is I would find a niche market that exists out there and try to like work your way into it. So like for example, my wife and I, and with my parents, we've kind of tried to get this lamb thing to go, and
Hmm.
we caught COVID, so we missed the market this year. But we were really trying to, we're like, we're gonna sell lamb on Easter because that's like, like most of the world
Huh.
celebrates Easter. So like find a niche and get into food production, and people like have this craving and this desire to know where their food's coming from. So if you can like market yourself, and I'm thinking kind of small, like on a micro thing, is to find a way to connect the consumer with the producer, and almost like this boutique niche marketing,
Mm.
because otherwise you're competing with these huge, these elites, so to speak, but this huge industry that is
Hmm.
insanely big. So for a person wanting to start, is find a niche. It doesn't have to be out of the country. I still think that we're a country that probably has like one of the safest food supplies in the world, and
Yeah.
we have like an insane amount of wealth compared to other countries, and people
Hmm.
have options here. You don't necessarily have options in other country, like there's not like a Whole Foods, Walmart, and then a Safeway.
It's true. Yeah, that's
Here.
fair.
So I mean, this is still the land of opportunity, in my opinion. But for a person wanting to get into the business, is finding that niche market. It's almost like tech startups. Is you have to find a niche that nobody else has taken over yet. So.
That's true. I was going to say, as far as one of the things that I watched recently was a Vice documentary talking about, was it waste from, I think, a chicken farm or
Mhm.
some sort of farm. And what this Chinese farmer did is he went ahead and said, okay, I'm not going to go ahead and, I'm like part of that enterprise, but I'm going to go ahead and have the side enterprise all about, well, roaches, cockroaches, right?
Mhm.
And how they would go ahead and feed off of all the waste from this chicken farm or lamb farm or pig farm or whatever it was. Do you think that'll become a thing here in the United States? Or, I don't know. I mean, I'm not down to eat roaches
But
myself, but
the thing is, though, is think about what eats roaches. So like, how can you play in that, like chickens eat roaches, and
that's true.
the
Yeah.
majority of the world consumes poultry. So I hate the idea. And when I was in college, I was in a class. It was on a crop production class. The professor was awesome. Like he was a cool, down to earth guy. But there was a lot of
Mhm.
bees in this class. And this girl gave a presentation about how eating livestock, eating cows was bad, and the future was in like crickets and cockroaches. And
Uh-huh.
it was absolutely disgusting. But I was just thinking, like, if I could find a way to make money off of crickets and feed hippies bugs, like I would do it. Like
Yeah.
if I made my fortune off of being the cricket king of Arizona, I would do it, because somebody's going to use it. But I think more importantly, like with some of those bugs, you have to think about what eats those bugs and how can you incorporate it in another way. Like, could you use them as fish food, and you can get into like tilapia or something like that? Like, that's
That's
another
true.
great protein. So, anyways,
What
though,
do you what do you think, Jake, as far as like if we talk about the world's elite and
Bill
how
Gates is buying up so much farmland right now.
water, man. Yeah, he is. He's the number one owner of private farmland in America, and he doesn't farm.
really? I didn't know that.
The elite are trying to go around and control every industry right now, right? They've taken over vaccines and trying to make them mandatory, trying to take
Hmm.
over the food and water supply, trying to take over the medical industry, take away, put us under mass surveillance, control the financial system to such an insane degree that every transaction is cataloged and tracked. We're entering a totally new age of just strict authoritarian control, and they're trying to spread it throughout the entire globe. That's the agenda right now, and we're seeing it systematically rolled out across all these different aspects of whether it's trade or healthcare, food. I mean, we're seeing it in real time, and it's insane.
Which oligarch, like which set of oligarchs do you think would win? U.S., Russia, India? I mean, in the next 50 years, if you were to say Bill Gates and his foundation will win, or Putin and his cronies will win, if you were to be a betting man, who would you say would win?
I don't necessarily know that any of them are going to win, right? Like most of the elite are on like the Bill Gates team, like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg people, like they're all part of the same club. And then you've got the outliers, like the people in Russia and
Not the
wherever else.
nationalistic, right? No national,
Yeah.
like the nationalistic oligarchs aren't who we have to worry about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be like the world elite. They're going to find a way to take them out eventually, I think. But they're the least of their problems, right? There's a concerted effort right now. Like their plan all along was to start wars in North Korea, Iran, Libya, Syria, and just come in and take these countries over and spread democracy or whatever. And
War Central.
they're just, they started getting backlash in a way that they didn't anticipate, and then Trump got elected, and it just totally derailed everything. And right now they're scrambling to get back on track, and it's not working out for them. And now you see this push for COVID vaccine passports, and like people were talking about this shit like 10, 20 years ago after 9/11 and the Patriot Act, and no one cared, and now still people aren't caring. But that's where we're heading.
Did you get your vaccine yet, Jake?
I didn't get my vaccine, and there's no yet there.
Oh, there's no yet? You haven't got 5G yet?
Got nothing to do with 5G.
Oh, man. I say that because I saw, what was it? Not Ryan Gosling, but Ryan Reynolds. He went ahead and got his vaccine today, and he's like, I'm getting 5G today. And I mean, you know, it's Deadpool, so of course I got to relate with the guy. But no, I don't know, buddy. Have you gotten your vaccine yet, or no?
So actually, I actually got something better. I got antibodies because I caught it. You know, which for some people, it makes perfect sense to, you know. There's a lot of populations out there that are probably at risk, and the vaccine makes sense. You know, my thing is there's people who need it worse than I do. And I don't know. I mean, I have the antibodies now. I'm not in a super big rush to run out and do something.
What was it like, by the way?
It sucked.
What was it? Oh, it sucked. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was interesting because, you know, like one of the things you see this all over the place is like the measuring temperatures. You know, but like Lily nor myself ever really ran like a fever. Like it wasn't high enough to
really
leap on somebody's radar, but we lost pace. But it's interesting because it seems like it's so different from everybody. Like I don't doubt that there's probably people who have really bad cases, and you know, I don't know. One thing that is really, you know, bothered me about this whole thing is like we're quick to address this pandemic and COVID-19 and come up with a vaccine, but like we're not quick to tell people who are overweight to change their diet and exercise. Like there's a lot of like preventative healthcare measures that I think that we're skipping. Like, and I'm a bigger guy, right? And I'm by no means fit. I've got the dad bod on for sure. But
yeah,
one of those things though, you know, like during this whole time, like I've been really focused on and I need to focus a little bit more about eating healthier, making sure that I get plenty of sunlight, making sure that I'm taking a good vitamin, like all of the stuff that a doctor would tell me to do before the pandemic and to get healthy. Like I just feel like if we can make people more healthy, then we don't have to worry about COVID-19. We don't have to worry about, there's a lot of things we could stop worrying about, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems like I don't know. I try to trace things back to how much money we spend on things, and it seems like there's been a lot of money spent on this.
Well, I think...
And there's no money on losing weight, right? That's an old market.
Well, I think
There's no
Jake.
money to be made on healthy people.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's kind of the thing, right? Is to say, are we going to make Y amount of dollars versus this X type of disease?
yeah,
And I mean, I work for a corporation, so I understand what that's like.
yeah,
Like, what is the potential amount of money that we're going to go ahead and make? But I mean, in a totally different facet. But I think at the same time to say, look, what is the amount of money that a society could make if we were to do the things that you were just talking about, buddy? The vitamin and all that other shit. What is that money? And honestly, sometimes I think to myself that we don't even know
yeah.
what would be that potential amount of money. We
Can I
don't
say
know.
something about this?
Yeah.
It's not about money, right? The FDA has been in charge of what's healthy for us, what's good for us, like what dietary habits we should adopt, what medications are good for what treatments, and basically micromanaging doctors. And they've been wrong every step of the way. They're 20, 30, 40 years behind what we find to be true since their inception.
Yeah.
And this has been one of the major problems that has led to us being so unhealthy.
Yep.
And doctors not really thinking for themselves and just going along with it. Public schools telling us, remember the food triangle that we were taught in school? Like,
Oh
you got to
yeah.
eat more bread than anything.
Ooh, there's my plate
Like,
now. It's even weirder. It's not a pyramid anymore. It's a program called My Plate. But yeah, I
yeah,
get
so like,
Oh.
this is one of the major things, and it doesn't really matter how much money we put into this. Right? Like, if we put money at a problem, it's just because someone lobbied the government and they're getting rich off of it.
Poor-
That's what happens when the government spends money now. Every time, literally every time, the merger between corporation and government is complete as far as I'm concerned. Right? There's a law written, there's a corporation profiting.
yeah. You-
More often than not.
The interesting thing, like getting back to the whole health aspect, though, I feel like what we eat and how we eat really plays into our health and like your activity and things like that. Like, so for example, I had an issue with my foot earlier, like about 2 months ago, and I think like the doctor, I had to go to urgent care because I like really couldn't walk on my foot. And the doctor was like, well, maybe he has gout. And I was like, oh, that's an old people disease. And it's like a
Yeah.
rich people disease, right?
Hmm.
I'm not convinced that I had gout because that week there was a good deal on lobster, and I've been watching a lot of TikToks on how to cook lobster, and we had lobster like 3 times that week. And shellfish tends to higher your what was the type of acid? It's the acid that you basically get that causes gout. Um,
Hmm.
but anyways, though, I also fell asleep on the couch 2 nights in a row, and I'm a little bit too tall for our couch, and my foot was at a weird angle, so I could have had gout and ate a lot of lobster and had elevated levels of acid in my body, or I could have, I could have just slept funny on my foot. I don't know what today though. Our
Yeah.
diet, like that, plays a huge, that I think that really plays into our overall health, and yeah, I don't know, and the quality of foods that we eat. My wife, she's like made me. And sometimes she has like twist my arm to get me to eat all these different vegetables that I didn't even know existed growing up in Parker, learning about
Yeah.
the food pyramid, like the La Pera cafeteria nor the Parker High School cafeteria. We're focused on just feeding us shitty chicken sandwiches
Yes.
and Michelle Obama lunches, They didn't really show us how good certain foods were. They're probably better for us as well. So,
I mean, no, and to your point, I mean, just things cooked really, really well, right? And with butter. I mean, butter is just the universal.
dude,
Uh,
talk about, but okay, one quick thing here. So, my whole life, like I've had problems with diarrhea. Like this is probably going pretty in depth. And like my
mhm.
wife, as soon as like we got married, she's like, "That's not right. Like you shouldn't have those problems." And I went to the doctor, and it was right before we got married, and I went to like a university medical center, and they tried to tell me that I had cystic fibrosis, which it was a resident who told me that. So like there was probably 3 weeks
Wow.
where I thought I was gonna die. Anyways, though, through like elimination diet, I found out that I have problems eating like the fake butter, like the country crock crap,
Oh, the
imperial,
margarine,
yeah,
right?
margarine, which FDA said that's so much healthier for us than real butter, but it was making me so sick, and like
Whoa.
I had like bad gastrointestinal problems, and then I cut one thing out of my diet, and everything is fine.
Really? Holy shit.
The invention of margarine and the fake butters is when people started having like obesity problems
Mhm.
and coronary issues, heart attacks, things like that. Before that, these weren't really issues in this country.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was going to go ahead and say, as an anecdote, talking to my dad years ago, when he would talk to his grandmother, my great grandmother, he told me a story about how, and she lived to 105. She told me the story about how my dad said, Grandma, or butter is not good for you. And she ended up slapping him and said, no, 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 no. Butter is amazing for you. Margarine is really bad for you. And
Mhm.
to your point, buddy, I mean, that's insane that something that is kind of artificial, such as margarine, is now,
One
something that was
molecule
hurting
away
you.
from plastic. It's one molecule away from plastic.
No kidding. Wow,
No,
I didn't know that.
I learned that in my chemistry class. But anyway, I don't
Get
really,
one of those. Get one of those butter bells. The water and everything. You put the butter inside of it. I think that's 10 times better than margarine. Although I like margarine because you can spread it, but I don't use
no.
it
So
anymore
what you
myself.
do? There
Just
you
leave the
can.
butter out of the refrigerator.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, that's what we do. But so when I was teaching, I taught a dairy unit. It's so easy to make your own butter too. Like literally, you can make your own butter and kind of put some cool things in it. Super super simple, and you can buy everything at the grocery store. Like all you need is some heavy whipping cream, and you just need to shake the crap out of your butter, and put it in a little jar, and just shake it for like 30 minutes straight, and you'll have butter in like 20 minutes. And you have buttermilk as well. But dude, I had this kid that poured way too much salt. Like you put the butter on your lips, you'd pucker your lips, and you'd look like an old man because they'd be so wilted because of how much salt he put in his butter. But super easy, super good for you, and like I don't know, it was fun. I enjoyed it.
That kind of reminds me of early humans, right? A group of individuals
He's like, hey, I'm
sitting
gonna
around the
melt
fire.
this and see what happens.
Exactly, right? Like, hey, here's this giant kind of herbivore. I'm going to milk it, and then I'm going to shake it the hell up.
Yeah,
That's one of the things that always boggles my mind, right? And maybe I just don't know hunger like our ancestors did,
yeah.
which is, hey, man, we should go ahead and shake that shit up.
Anything.
I mean, just anything. And you're right, buddy. Like, I want to be in their shoes. I want to go ahead and see. And I'm going to go off topic here and go a little crazy, but whenever I think of people in the future, I always think of aliens. And anybody that is an alien is actually somebody from the future just watching us, being like, well, what's that dickhead doing with, heavy whipping cream, right? He's shaking it up to make butter for the very first time. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of see aliens, even. It's like, it's not an actual alien. It's just Jake, 3,000 years in the future, watching us, making butter.
It's the Anunnaki, man. The Sumerian god.
do
I've been watching
you
all
think?
the aliens.
Do you think even in the future, let's say 3,000 years in the future, that we will have some sort of Illuminati or kind of hierarchy? And this is a question for Jake.
I think that humans are on the verge of transcending all the major flaws that we have, or at least a lot of them. The whole power structure of the world is falling away. It's just collapsing. The amount of control that has sustained on society for thousands of years is not sustainable. And I think we are seeing it collapse in real time. And what they're trying to do cannot sustain for sure. So I think all that old kind of power structure like that is falling away. Things like greed. I guess greed is the root of pretty much most of our flaws. Things like that are starting to fall away. The desire to rule over people is going to start falling away, and people are just going to start caring for each other and looking out for each other. And I think we're just going to kind of rise past that and get to a kind of a higher place.
I
How we
think
get there, I don't know. I just think it's naturally occurring, and a lot of the chaos in the world going on right now is because of that.
I think we'll still. I mean, and this is my opinion, but my opinion is we'll still have a, a limit of greed. I think we will, but I think it'll be more of a longer amount of time. So it'll be like not in the short term, but in the very extreme long term. So not like in your lifetime, but in your grandchildren's lifetime of greed. Of and the one that I go to, and this is personally myself, is if there is some sort of climate change, I'm going to go ahead and buy land in Alaska, in Juneau, or not just Juneau, but Anchorage, and I'm going to build, I don't know, some sort of structures there. So that would be an example.
What's the logic behind building the structures in Alaska?
So if you were to, if climate change were true, right, I would build
on the coast, or not Bill Gates. Al Gore wouldn't have a coastal mansion, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, I'll
Sorry.
go ahead and eat Al Gore's body. It would be more of a, if it were true, then I would go ahead and build, let's say, like a trailer park or a subdivision or something like that in, let's say, Anchorage, right? And then I would have that inherited by my grandchildren or great grandchildren, right? So I think there will be a certain amount of greed, but I think it'll be generational rather than just in 5 years.
Well, I think that's more like caring for your offspring and your family and ancestors moving forward. I don't think that's necessarily greed, right? That's just that's
Preparation,
I would say
man.
more caring.
Well, it would be like
Greed is more like I'm going to exploit these people over here to enrich myself. That's what I mean by greed.
Oh, I see.
I don't know. Maybe I'm more of a pessimist, but I almost feel like we live like in. I think everything's really cyclical. Where like, and you can see this
Yeah.
through the history of mankind, where you'll see there's golden ages, and then we move into like a dark age, right? Like, and it seems like when we get to a point where we start forgetting our history, we're doomed to repeat it again. Like you think about, like, for example, like the rise of the Roman Empire, right, which Rome was built
Hmm.
on exploitation of other cultures, right, and incorporating them. You get to the point where you have this golden era, and then you fall back into a dark age, and that's how medieval Europe happened, right, where all of a
Hmm.
sudden you have all of these small kingdoms that pop up, and they go through the same process because the written language of Latin in Rome, it becomes a
Hmm.
dead language, and people are doomed to repeat history again in order to build their civilization. So I guess my thought is the rise of the American era, right? That's where we're in now. I don't know if we've reached our golden age yet or if it's way in the past, but what happens when the woke culture that we're dealing with now erases our history, and
Hmm.
people forget? What if, will we ever forget, like, slavery? Are we doomed? Is the next big era, are they doomed to repeat everything because we erase our own history? Like, maybe
I
that's
think that's
optimistic, but
no. I think that's a great point. I mean, is the kind of slavery that ancient Rome had, right? The Republic and the actual empire. Is that the same kind of slavery that we saw, gosh, 200 years ago, 180 years ago?
I don't
Is that the
know, man.
same kind of slavery?
I just feel like we need to ask the Uyghurs who are making LeBron James's shoes right now because they're living slavery.
That's true. Yeah, right.
We live in an era now, and we despise slavery. Like, we can all agree that's an abhorrent thing that happened, but we have young people nowadays who are completely fine with buying a pair of Nike tennis shoes that were made in slave factories in China. Like,
The
That's
problem
true.
with slavery and this whole topic is that the social justice warrior retards, and I mean literally retards, they are retarding the advancement of society, which is why I'm comfortable calling them retards. Right? They boil this down to race and the white man exploiting the black man, but race or slavery is coming from just people being in control of others, and it doesn't matter. Like
transcend
it was
race.
happening,
Yeah.
yeah, it was happening in African countries, in European countries, in Asian countries. Like every race has been enslaving their own people and other people and then selling them to other races. It's just what happens when you let people rule over other people, and that's what's been going on. And that was even happening during the period of slavery in this country. And then what did we do? We rose past it and got beyond it. And I think it is going to be a cycle like that. But if you're just going to boil it down to, hey, this is just because of racism, we're going to be doomed to repeat this shit.
If I were to go ahead and say, let's say 100 years in the future, right? If I were to go ahead and boil down the races, I don't think it'll be more pigment. I think it'll be more who has the ability to genetically modify their offspring. That'll be one. And who has the ability to go ahead and cybernetically improve their offspring. It's going to be a double whammy. And I really honestly think, especially the genetically modified, and Jake, we talked about this last with the Chinese, right? The last podcast.
Yeah.
And then, and I was actually wrong. It wasn't 2020, it was 2019 when that doctor went ahead and made that change. But then also including the cybernetic enhancements as well. And if you have an offspring that can do both, you're going to have a race of 6'5" cybernetically enhanced individuals that'll just be able to tower intellectually, and athletically over anybody else that is normally born.
Yeah. Well,
there's a like we were talking about the elite and their agenda, right? Right now, the elite's agenda is a two-tiered society: rich and poor, rich and elite. I think. Yeah. I think a lot of what we're going to see happen is, especially now with like the COVID vaccine and people refusing to comply, the passports, all the things we're talking about, the strict authoritarian rule over us, you're going to start seeing breakaways and balkanization. And based on things like that, I think there's going to be kind of an area over here where people just refute technology like that and just kind of live kind of this pure spiritual life and free of technology and kind of connect with the land and the earth and kind of this whole hippie thing. And then you're going to see another kind of area where they're going to use more technology, but it's going to be more for good, and people are still going to be there's going to be flaws obviously in society, but I think ultimately it's going to, and then there's going to be the people who are going to stay with the status quo, the people who are threatening to take your children away if your kids don't get vaccinated, like the people who say like things need to be done my way or you need to go to prison. Like that's the people who are being brought to hysterics by COVID and by the media manipulation, people just living their life in just paranoia and fear. These people are going to embrace the status quo, and they're going to be what you're talking about in the future. They're going to be genetically modified, and and God knows what else is coming for them. And I think over the next few years, like Buddy said, it's going to like start getting dark. I believe that too. Like things are going to get really dark really soon. But through that, as we start to balkanize and break away and kind of people go with other people who kind of share their belief systems, I think there's going to be parts of and areas where things get a lot better. And it might take a while, but I think like a breakaway of society is inevitable. This is not going to sustain.
I think it'll be gradual at first, and then all of a sudden. Whereas, you look at the Irish people before the Irish famine, the potato famine, where if you look at that kind of history, the English look at the Irish who really sustained themselves off of the potato, and they were just like, oh my God, these people are huge. They're gigantic. They have all their caloric intake they should when they're kids. And that's how Irish people became so huge, is they were able to kind of get to their genetic potential of they're eating potatoes every day, right? And I think that the same will happen, not in our lifetime, but maybe our kids' lifetime or our grandkids' lifetime. They'll see individuals that are genetically enhanced, and then, of course, cybernetically enhanced, also being genetically enhanced, seeing like, wow, these people are really taking advantage of the peak of what a human could be. So
I don't know. I guess like I feel a little bit jaded about that whole idea. I mean, and I guess maybe it comes from like being a dad and all of that. It terrifies me to even think about that. And earlier you'd asked about like what oligarchs should we be worried about, and like hands down for me it's the tech oligarchs. Like the amount of
Yeah.
control that these tech companies have is pretty dang scary. Like, thinking about like and one of the and I kind of cycle back to what I know about food and agriculture, but Jeff Bezos and Amazon is really looking at venturing into food, right? And they've already with Whole Foods and things like that. But
Hmm.
like, imagine like in the small town that we grew up in, where there wasn't a grocery store anymore. There was an Amazon food center. Think about like how many people worked in the grocery stores and things like that. Like we're heading to this industry that everybody's willing to embrace, that's owned by these tech oligarchs that are just completely changing everything, which I know change is like inevitable, right? But
Hmm.
especially stuff like genetically modifying, like the CRISPR technology, and some of these things like where we're trying to eliminate things like Down syndrome, right? Like to how
Yeah.
it's almost like eugenics, right? Where how do we cull parts of the population? But like, and I don't know, I truly think that life is a miracle in its own, and
Yeah.
like every time I see my daughter, all I can think of was like, wow, she's a result of like she's a result of her mom's genetics, my genetics, and life, right? All of those things. And
Hmm.
like we didn't find out what her gender was. Like we wanted everything to be a complete surprise, and it just amazes me. And it like to mess up how perfect life happens, like how perfect life is. Like basically, like all of the conditions have to be right. Like like in high school in health class or like in eighth grade, how they taught us that, well, if you mess around, you're going to have a baby. Like no, there are so many things that have to be just right in order for a conception to happen,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
us to want. And like you think about the couples that try so hard to have kids, like
Yeah.
everything has to line up perfectly for life to happen. And
Yeah.
through with that, by trying to eliminate some undesirable gene, is just disgusting. I think it's disgusting. Like,
Mm.
because you think about like things that we think that are disabilities, like kids that are autistic and things like that. Like I don't think that it's a disability. It's just different.
Hmm.
Maybe they have a different purpose, and maybe
Yeah.
yeah. Like I had a student. I'm not going to say what his name was, but he was autistic. He was an older kid, but he was like an amazing artist. Like
Hmm.
how do we know some of our great artists of the past? Like I'm sure they were different. What if they were autistic? Like and
Like
we have a
Wolfgang
society, yeah,
or
like now we have a
Wolfgang.
society that wants to remove some of these imperfections by making better humans. Like, are we removing part of our culture? I don't know. It's
No, I think I'd actually thought about that recently, where it was like you have individuals that might be on the spectrum of autism,
mhm,
and they've actually contributed a lot to our culture.
yeah,
And I mean, is that wrong to get rid of? Probably. Well, not just probably, but it is, right?
yeah.
So, what is the fine line? And as a culture, what do we accept? And not just as a culture within the United States, but in the world,
Human culture.
right? China, Brazil, the EU, right? What is the fine line when we say what is too much and what is not enough? And
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's a good way of putting it.
So let me to kind of sidestep this conversation because that's like a really deep thought that I don't think any of us have an answer to.
Yeah.
There are people who literally believe that your opinion should land you in jail.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
The differences we have as a culture, like they can't sustain. So there's a massive movement right now in the conservative community. I use the term conservative loosely, right? Like not the woke left, not the people who listen to the mainstream media all day, like the like really the kind of the red pilled people who realize like reality is not what the media is trying to portray it as. There's a massive movement to like go sustainable, create a sustainable living, like buy land and raise your own animals and vegetables and support yourself, and kind of you could create a community and get other people to live out in the forest with you or up in the mountains and outside of these cities, and not be involved in all this. And this is a really growing movement that I'm seeing online, and it's really given me hope for what's to come.
Yeah. One thing that I've been thinking this entire conversation is it seems like in a lot of different things, like, and I don't know if it's human nature, where we envision a utopia, but in reality that utopia grows into a dystopia, where
Yeah.
you think about like especially like in the Industrial Revolution, where you had, people lived like how Jake's describing in these rural communities. Everybody was growing their own food and things like that. But for some reason, we were sold this vision that life would be better in an industrial city center, and so we left what we know is probably better for us to go to this utopia in cities and these, things like this grand vision. And now we're going back. Like I just think it's interesting where, like, when you're talking about like genetically modified humans, like that kind of sounds like a horror movie. But in some people in, places where they're doing, like China, I'm sure that's a utopian idea where they're going to build a better world. But at what point does it become dystopic?
I have two thoughts.
Well, we're already there.
I have a serious thought and then a silly thought. The serious thought is China is literally Japan 30 years ago, where everybody thought Japan was going to be an absolute powerhouse. But a lot of China's workforce is aging, and I don't think they'll be sustainable. They have a lot more population, China does, but I don't think their workforce is sustainable as the United States, and that's mostly because we are a republic, right? Where people want to go ahead and migrate into the United States, whereas people don't really want to migrate into China unless you're coming out of North Korea.
What if they can perfect AI?
Well, that's just going to happen.
They have to, yeah, right? Yeah. One interesting thing that is another thought about, especially looking at like the aging population of the worker, is birth rates are falling in Western countries majorly. And then you think about how China, their one-child policy and abortion have negatively impacted the ratio of males to females in Chinese culture.
And that's what I was getting to with my thought, is because of the one-child policy, because of again, they have 1.4 billion people, right? 1.3, somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. My unserious thought, and I know we're hitting the 1 hour mark here, is Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson sitting across the table. And if we were using today's kind of slang, it would be like, listen, man, fuck that whole farm thing. You're going to be working in a factory. Alexander Hamilton says to Thomas Jefferson, no, man. You're going to work in that factory. You're going to have a great time. It's going to be wonderful. You're going to work there your whole life. You're going to have a pension. And Thomas Jefferson says, are you fucking kidding me, man? You want to live in the countryside where there's no pollution and you have animals you can talk to. And I just think about that today as far as the Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, right? Talking to each other. I don't know. It's one of those kind of funny conversations I just think to myself every day. Those two guys bickering amongst each other, not really talking about AI and everything else, but living in the country versus living in the city.
The crazy thing is, I feel like they were both right to an extent. In World War II is a classic example of why they were right. America, not only did we outproduce the Axis in terms of tanks and weapons and things like that, but we were literally, and we still are, the breadbasket of the world. Like, you think about the amount of food that we produce. Like, we are a net exporter of so many things in terms of like of staples that the rest of the world depends upon. Like, one of my favorite things is in the valley that we grew up in, right? They grow durum wheat. It's called desert durum wheat. And they send that high protein wheat all around the world to mix with lower quality wheats because of how great it is. And that's grown in America. That's grown in Arizona. That's grown in Parker, and they're sending it to Italy because the Italians can't grow wheat as good as we can. And that's the legacy of that conversation between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, where we can outproduce food and we can I don't out industry. We're just yeah. I don't know, call me.
We can do it.
We
Yeah.
can do it. Yeah, we can do it. We can do both. You know, we didn't have to sell the farm to industrialize. I mean, we lost a few farm workers here and there, and we had to rely on a migrant workforce, and and we had to
Yeah.
import workers from other countries and things like that. But we still we were the breadbasket of the world during World War II, and we outproduced the Axis. We had access to
Hmm.
resources, and we could make tanks, bombs, planes, flamethrowers, computers, all kinds of stuff, right? And I think
Yeah.
that if we can hold true to that idea that we keep our food sovereignty and we're able to keep our own industry, I mean, I don't know. I too feel like how Jake had said that things will go dark fast, but I'm like, man, that inside of me, that American exceptionalism, like
Hmm.
I hope that we can persevere.
What do you think, Jake? What do you want to round out this conversation with?
Just to kind of touch on what Buddy said a little bit with regards to keeping our exceptionalism, especially with regards to farming, right? If we can break away from the strict stranglehold of control that, again, the government has over all aspects of society, the FDA, the USDA, the EPA, like these all sound good to people who don't know what is actually going on, but these are tyrannical organizations. They steal land. They tell people they can't use the land. They steal animals. They force people to burn crops and destroy crops
Subsidy,
because
yeah.
they're trying to control the markets and manipulate how things are sold and then you got labor laws and taxes, and these things are just crushing people who are running businesses. People die and try and pass on their farmland. Like people say,
Yeah.
"Oh, the estate tax is $5 million
Ridiculous,
or
man.
whatever." Like if you've
Crazy.
got land, it's easy to have that much land and assets on a farm,
Yeah.
and then you pass that to your kids who want to continue on with the farm. They can't do it.
Yeah.
They have to pay money for shit that they don't have. Like it's not. There's nothing they can. They didn't get money in the bank. They just got a bunch of shit that they're using to do work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these fucking progressives do not understand that. Kyle Kalinske, he's a progressive I listen to on YouTube sometimes to kind of get a different perspective on things. He was on a
Opposition
plane.
research.
Yeah, he was on a plane and he's flying over like flyover country, right? And he takes a picture and he puts it on Twitter. He's like, I don't understand what are these, what's going on in this picture. And he's talking about like all the squares that you see that separate the different farms and fields and everything. And he got crucified because dude, they're farms.
Yeah.
Learn a little bit before acting like such a cocky prick, like you know everything.
Yeah, Americans are so far away from removed from their food, and from that whole thing. It's sad the amount of misinformation and disinformation that's out there, but
Yeah.
it's nuts, man.
Dude, I get all my food from Chipotle. I don't know what you're talking about, buddy. I get my burrito, I get my barbacoa, my guacamole. Like, go fuck yourself, all right? $8 a burrito.
So one thing that I was Jake reminded me of, and I know a lot of people hate Trump, and there's so much stuff around him, but he was probably one of the only most recent presidents who cared about farmers in terms of actually listening to them. Like he went to Farm Bureau conventions, and like the one thing, like the National FFA convention, every sitting president gets an invite to that, and he went I think 3 times to the National FFA convention. Like talk about caring about the future of American agriculture. Like you can say whatever you want about that man, but at the same time, like he listened to farmers. He listened to what they had to say. He empowered them, and I don't know if I don't think of that as a flaw. And I went to a Farm Bureau convention. I heard him speak, and like to actually have a president there was amazing. It made you feel like, wow,
They cared.
yeah, he cared. Yeah, and no other president has done that. So
We're going to look back, and I don't think Trump was a great president. I don't think he was a good president, but he wasn't a bad president, and I'm seeing that more and more now. I'm really feeling that. And we're going to look back and realize just how good we had it as more and more things start rolling out in this dystopian police state that they got going on, and coming soon, COVID vaccine passports, like that shit is coming. And I'm not complying.
I'm really torn, just to kind of round this conversation out, is Mark Kelly, right? He's an astronaut, so he's literally seen the Earth from in space, looking at the planet, right? But he's also, he's a Democrat, right? What have you guys seen that Mark Kelly's done so far since he's become a senator? I really haven't paid enough attention. I mean, I have Mitt Romney and Mike Lee here in Utah, and it's still a red state, very red state.
I don't know how much has really happened. I haven't really been paying attention too much. I know he was running a very, very hard anti-gun campaign. Obviously, like some like people like that, I get it. You don't like guns. Your wife was almost murdered, and she's got severe physical issues now as a result of that attack, and it's sad. And I understand why people go through things like that, and they become scared of guns and don't want them, but. There used to be this kind of understanding between liberals and conservatives, like, we love our guns here. Someone like Mark Kelly never would have been elected in this state 10 years ago, 5 years ago even. And now, like, that's the sign that things are changing. And it's these Californians that are coming in here and infesting this state. In terms of specifics, I don't know what he's done. Like, I've stopped caring. Like, I know what's coming for this country, and I'm just trying my best to deal with it. I sold my house. I'm just kind of adjusting and ready to move as things start to collapse more.
One thing, and maybe this is a conversation for next time, but like thinking about the Mark Kelly thing is like there's like I've talked to my wife a lot about this, but like there's this thing that exists when like a woman shows leadership sometimes is that she comes off being, for lack of better words, like people think she's bitchy. Whereas if a man were to do that, oh, he's showing leadership. It's interesting because I feel like his opponent, Martha McSally, like, and I watched some of the debates between them. Like, she was an awesome candidate. She was a fighter pilot veteran, right? And then we're going against a fighter pilot astronaut veteran, So it's interesting. So like they were pretty comparable as terms of like their qualifications, but like I asked my mom, I kind of polled different people, and they said they just couldn't stand Martha McSally, and it was one of those things where I don't know if there's
well, she lost to Kristen Sinema the election before.
Yeah,
that's true.
I don't know who thought it would be a good idea to run her again.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe Kirsten Sinema won.
She's actually been like, I was following her the first couple years she was in there. She did not take that for granted, and she had held some very controversial positions.
I think in the next 10 years, you'll see a lot more of her, especially in the Senate.
Yeah. But it's just interesting because it's almost like sexism is a real thing, and was Martha McSally a victim of it? I don't know. It's just interesting. But I agree. She was an appointed senator. I was really hoping that they'd find somebody else to run against Mark Kelly, but I don't know.
I think if I were the Republican Party, one of the things I would do that would be the smartest is create more states. So Puerto Rico, right? I would go ahead and create Puerto Rico as a state. No, you don't think so?
They would get 2 senators, and they would be blue.
You think
and
so?
That would give Democrats the edge. They're trying to do that trying to turn D.C. into a state as well, and it'd be the same thing. And Republicans would lose the Senate forever if that happened.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes I also think that we talked about this before, Jake, that the Republican Party is dead. It's going to start fragmenting, like the Republican.
It's so divided.
Yeah, it is very divided. You have the Trump supporters, and then you have the old traditional conservatives.
What are they called?
Conservatives.
Neocons. You have neocons, and then you have fiscal conservatives, and then you have Tea Party people, and now
I think the Trump supporters, the Tea Party people, the Libertarians, and the Republican Party, they're going to converge together and reject the Martha McSallys, the John McCains, the George Bushes, the Dick Cheneys, that old neocon line of thinking. Like, really, there's nothing conservative about their ideology. Yeah. And I think you're going to start. I think the base of the Republican Party, the true base of the limited government, is going to start to really come together and reject the Republican Party of the old. I mean, we saw that with Trump. Like, his numbers in that last election were staggeringly high. Yeah. This is not what I want to talk about, right? I'm convinced the election was rigged, right? Mm-hmm. But even if it wasn't, like, the number of people who voted for Trump, it was insane considering like how that played out. So I think that the Republican Party may die, but that base is gonna find a home eventually, and it may stay in the Republican Party if they can reject the neocon movement.
But on the left-hand side of things as well, like you have like the Bernie Bros. Like I think that the left is. I mean, they kind of came together in this last election, but I don't know. Like there was a lot of election promises that Joe Biden made and Kamala Harris made, and like they haven't delivered on some of them. And
they won't. Like we're seeing the kids in the cages. Like they don't give a fuck about kids in cages. They don't care. They've never cared. It's always been about Trump and getting him out of there. And like I'm convinced,
that was what
right?
rallied on was their hate for Trump, right?
Mm-hmm. And it's the same with the neocons, right? Like the Joe Walshes, the George Bushes, the Mitt Romneys, like the neocon movement. They hated Trump too, and they are aligned together. They're trying to have the same agenda. That's why when it came time to look into election fraud, they all turned their backs on Trump and were happy to have Joe Biden in there.
Well,
they were happy to, and they're all going to continue to, I think, rig elections and try and maintain control. But people are seeing this now, and it's the age of the internet. They can't limit information flow, no matter how hard they try.
The last thing I'd like to add to this conversation is the reason why I didn't want to become a journalist, which was Obama and the administration effectively silencing whistleblowers, right? Snowden. And I really thought that Trump would go ahead and pardon Snowden. And he never did.
Yeah.
I think he made a deal like, hey, I won't fuck with your guys' shit if you leave me and my family alone. Let us go off and do our thing. Like, they were coming after him. They wanted to put him in prison for treason. Yeah. They wanted to put his kids in prison for treason.
True.
Or kill them, or God knows what kind of punishments they would happen.
I was just bummed out. I kind of want that president that says, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to pardon Snowden. Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping for an Afghanistan withdrawal. Like, he really could have done something.
Yeah.
But, like, I really think he felt his life was threatened. Or maybe it was all just a charade the whole time and he wasn't legit. I don't know. But that's what I really believe, is that he felt his life was threatened, and this whole plan he lost, and he needed to just bow away and live to fight another day. And I think we're going to see that.
So, like, with this whole thing, though, like whether you're anybody's right or left, I feel like the one thing that I've become even more pessimistic about is that I do not like politicians. It's one of those things I felt like I'm like, the best person to make decisions about my life is me. That's how I feel. This whole process, I've just felt like it's like I'm so tired of other people trying to control what I do, what I think, what I see, what I have access to. I'm tired of people trying to control me. And I want to get away from that, and I want as much personal sovereignty and freedom as I possibly can have, because nobody knows what's best for me other than me. That's honestly how I feel.
And that's the way you should, Pill. That's literally the truth.
Yeah. Welcome to the 2020s, man.
Cool. I think this wraps up what, podcast number 4?
Is it 5? I think it's 5.
Or 5. Yeah, number 5. Buddy, thank you so much for joining, man.
Dude,
you should join us next time.
I will. I'll come back as long as you guys want me to come back. This is actually a lot of fun. I feel it was very freeing, I think. I work in a place where you don't always get to speak your mind, but I'm happy I can speak my mind to you guys.
Absolutely.
Hey, I'm gonna stop the recording, but both of you, I need you to stay on the line while it uploads, okay?
Cool, sounds good.